Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk some Shokugeki no Soma chapter 253. Okay, excellent, cool. Guys, hey, thanks for tuning into the video. Let's get into it. Alright, Shokugeki no Soma. So, going into this chapter, it's the final round. We're going in, it's great, it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna see a lot of cool stuff. And for this video, there's like 4 main points that I really want to touch on, because these are the 4 points that I found most interesting. So they are going to be the Korra and Courage at the beginning of the chapter, or not the beginning of the chapter, well, beginning of the chapter, and also them with Azami. That's just because that's a comedy point, and we have to address it because I think it's funny. The next point is the thing that Irina says about being a good girl. The third point is the whole setup for the final bout, the appetizer and the main dish. And finally, the last point is actually shit, I'm forgetting. Oh shit, you know, I had it all listed out in my head. Oh yeah, no, the last point is going to be a technical point. It's going to be everyone's favorite topic, the stamina drain. That's going to be what we're going to be talking about. So those are the 4 points. We're just gonna get into it, and let's start off with the easiest thing: the Korra and the other girl. I don't really care for the other girl. I think her name's Courage. Anyway, sorry, I should care. All right, look, the point with this one is like you start the chapter off with a beautiful color spread, and again, we cannot deny that they are very pretty drawings. All right, they're pretty drawings, but that's where it's gonna stop. But the thing here is, like, you go into Azami's scene later where he's being the really evil businessman, drinking his wine as he stares off into the distance. Meanwhile, you have the 2 girls on one bed, and it's like they're in the same room, and it's like, God damn it, you know what's happening. This is Soma. Did you know that the author for this series was... No, I'm not gonna add in that little bit of trivia because that little bit of trivia is unnecessary. But I'm not the author, the artist. Anyway, it's just like those little segments, just like, man, these girls are just so indoctrinated into his way of thinking, like, ugh. But they were having a nice conversation about that whole thing with, you know, rebelling daughters, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that, when you have a sequence like that, though, these 3 people are relatively intimate with each other, that they're all in the same hotel room. I assume that they're not sleeping in the same room as he is, because, like, Azami has money, he can afford to put them up in their own lodgings. But when you look at the bed that they're sitting on, it's also like one of the single beds. So if this was like a 3-bedroom, or I don't know how Japanese hotels do. They might have different cultural standards when it comes to like hotel beds and whatever else. But, you know, I look at that and it's just like, to what degree can you even say these people are impartial? I thought the whole idea about the WGO was, you know, they're going to be a neutral party, they stand for food, and then you have these 2 who are so thoroughly in Azami's bed that it's just, it's ridiculous. And it does point out what Anne said at the beginning when these came in, that she couldn't believe that there were other people who gave themselves over to Azami. When you look at this, like, yeah, they've given themselves over to Azami. They're now his accessories. They're just like the people who are there to talk to him about what he decides to do and give him counsel. So, pretty interesting, and to some degree, it's like, it's hard to not see those 2 as villains, even though they've given us the promise of neutrality. And truthfully, I do believe they're actually going to uphold their promise of neutrality, because even with Azami, although he pulls some really just cruel maneuvers, especially when it came to the whole rebel thing, he does to some degree keep his word. He does keep his promises to some degree if he makes them. So the Korra and Courage, they just end up being they're interesting, right? Like, you can clearly see that they're antagonistic and that their character is more or less compromised. Or, well, no, not even. You can't even say their character is more or less compromised. Central as an ideology is just so strange in general that we haven't seen, like, legitimate bads of Central. We've seen legitimate bads of Azami. Like, Azami's policies to remove the research societies, that's not really something that you could get coming out of true gourmet cooking. That's something that's coming out of Azami's egomaniac tendencies. Anyway, that point went on for too long. I didn't think, I was just gonna make a funny quip about it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But if you guys have anything else you want to add, you know, like always, just go in the comments. Moving on. The next point, let's touch on what's it gonna be. I should have written this down. Oh no, here we go. So the next point is what Irina says about her being a good girl. Now this, I really like this moment because Soma makes the little observation, she's never been a good girl. She tossed my food when it tasted really good. And it's like, no, that's actually, Irina's right. She has the right context. She was being a good girl. Remember what Azami taught her. Azami taught her to always judge food harshly. Like if it doesn't reach true gourmet standards, toss it out. That's what she's about. That's what her training was. It was the person who would toss out good food if it didn't meet some other kind of standard. So when she's saying like, hey, you know, I'm not the good girl you wanted me to be anymore, it's like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. Like she's not the good girl in the context of Azami's good, and Azami's good, as we find out with his evilness, his evil rant, it's like Irina's gonna lead Central into the true gourmet world, and it's like, what does that even mean, Azami? Why is Irina so important? Why is she such a big deal? And really, when you think about it, the only thing it can be right now is, actually, there's two things. It's either the Nakiris have an insane amount of money behind their name, that they have a massive fortune that now good old Azami can't touch because he got disowned by Senzaemon, so he can't touch that money, so he needs Irina as the source of that fortune, or it's that Irina has the god tongue, something that she cultivated from when she was a child. Really, the money thing seems to be whatever, because Azami said he's made connections before, so maybe money's not the big deal, but Irina's god tongue, that's the only real thing you can say, hey, this is probably what's gonna lead Central with this whole gourmet rant and whatever else. And even then, even talking about that, you know, like I said, the Central philosophy, it's still just annoying. I don't think the free market would ever let the Central philosophy work, because one of the things that I remember very vividly is that Azami took issue with one of the judges way back when, in one of the Shokugekis, and it was one of the, remember back when Ishiki was like setting up the autumn elections. I think that's what it was, autumn elections. Anyway, back in those days when it was, you know, just kids against kids, just going at it to be the #1 first year. Back in those days, we had those two judge girls. They were sisters and they owned two companies, and their company was pretty much distribution. They made packed meals or something, and when Azami was introduced, one of the big things was that he was in opposition with that person. And when you think about it, that person is the one who stands for supplying food to everyone. When you look at what Azami wants to do, when you look at his antagonistic ties, it seems like Azami wants to just remove food for the common people, because he feels that food for the common people, or food that's made for the intention of giving it to common people, isn't true gourmet. If he wants to neutralize that, again, that's stupid. If that is what it is, it's stupid. And truthfully, I'm talking out of my ass right now because I kind of have to go back and read up on all of Azami's philosophies, because his whole thing with Central is, Central is an interesting idea because there's some aspects of it that are very admirable, but then there's the stuff that Azami's talking about as if, look man, the common denominator, it's working class people. You take away food that they can afford, your business is just gonna die. Like, it's free market. Anyway, let's not rant about that because I don't know enough about it to like give good points, and I'm pretty sure something I said there could be wrong. My memory's so bad now. But moving on from there, just regular old Azami stuff. He wants Irina. Anyway, with the Irina thing, it's just, if they have the god tongue, they have the perfect litmus device for being able to say what's good and what isn't. It's Irina's god tongue. And when you consider the whole thing about impurities, the impurities can only be people like Soma, who are just teaching her to have fun with cooking. Overall, the moral of the story is screw Azami. That's really just the moral. Okay, third point to talk about is, shit, I should just read what I said the first time. I can't remember. Okay, no, got it again. It's the appetizers and the main dish. Now this is cool. All right, if there was ever gonna be something that I could say is uniquely Regiment de Cuisine, it's this one. This is cool. This is super cool. I'm totally into it. And it's funny too because back in the earlier chapters, back when I think it was Kuga versus Tsukasa, people were saying like, oh, you guys, you know, like the Central side, they made a 3-course meal. Like they made appetizer, main dish, and a dessert. And you know, maybe that's why they won. But back in those days, the fans were talking like that. Like, you know, there was a flow in the meals that they were giving the judges. And it's like, okay, that's cool. Now the Regiment de Cuisine has gone and made it official. This is officially what we're doing. And now we have to add in the extra factor of, are these dishes going to complement each other? Are they good enough? Are they going to mesh well together? And it's like, all right, that's an interesting aspect. And now for sure, teamwork is going to be even more important. So now we're going to see the selling point of the Regiment de Cuisine in full force, or at least that's what I would assume. The worst case scenario is if we get like just Subaru level help, pretty much, where you have just one person working on an ingredient and they toss it over to the other person. If there is less communication than there was with Subaru and Kuga, and less help between the two like that, then it's just like the rest of the Regiment de Cuisine. Although at this point you could say, well, there's an added value in that Irina and Soma can work that well together without talking. From the point of the novelty of the Regiment de Cuisine, I don't think it's that great. I mean, it's like, alright, they're just kind of doing the same thing that they were doing in previous ones. So looking at that, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because now, if they're being judged specifically on whether or not their dishes work well together, like, you know, that adds something and makes you think, okay, they have to work together more. And for these two, it's going to be pretty interesting, and it's probably going to be very awe-worthy. It's going to be like, you know, you see them helping, and it's going to be like, yeah, this is nice. And ideally, that's what we want. And then on the other side, we have Rindo and Tsukasa. And now we have to wonder, are they going to work well together? We know Tsukasa is anti-help. Or anti-help. He doesn't get along well with people like Soma. And when it comes to Rindo, Rindo is much more similar to you know what, let's not say Soma. She's much more similar to Jochiro than she is to Azami. So now the issue is, how is this going to work out? And this is like, again, where the true gourmet thing falls apart. Because like, Rindo goes and she finds exotic ingredients and she brings them back and she makes them taste good. Is that true gourmet? Is making really weird things taste good true gourmet? Because that's Jochiro all over. That's Soma all over. It's just, it's ridiculous. It's again ridiculous. If the Elite 10 are automatically assumed to be true gourmet by Azami's standard, if Soma had gotten into the Elite 10 before this happened, would he have been true gourmet? It's just, his Azami's standards are still so unclear, and when it comes to Rindo, it just gets even weirder because we don't know what kind of practice Rindo goes through. Is there like a step-by-step progress that guarantees something is going to be true gourmet, or is it just a matter of it being tasty or not? Because if it's a matter of it being tasty or not, we go back to the problem with Irina that she had in the first chapter. It's tasty, but she doesn't want to acknowledge it. So with Rindo, there is that big conflict there because her style in particular seems to be a style more in tune with what Jochiro does. But going on from there, you could ask, well, are these two going to end up working together? And the big thing that we have to remember is that Rindo and Tsukasa have been together for such a long time. When they were like younger, Rindo told Tsukasa she wanted to be with him going into going into the top of the school. She wanted to be the top of the school with Tsukasa. That was in an extra little chapter that came in one of the volumes. It was just their personal little chapter. And it's like, when you consider that kind of behavior, the odds are in their favor. Because at the very least, Rindo and Tsukasa know each other so well that at the very least, Rindo should be able to accommodate Tsukasa. Because her style is more wild, it's probably more flexible than whatever Tsukasa is going to do. So now we have to wonder, is this where the fear factor is going to play in? Is she going to do something? Is her judgment going to be skewed because of her fear? Well, we'll have to see. And then the final point to talk about is finally the whole thing about stamina. So, listen. Logical consistency, or consistency in what you're setting up, right? We talked about it last chapter, and in this chapter it's just ridiculous because, well, no, it's not ridiculous. what happens in this chapter, and we have it in that very critical line that Tsukasa says, the fact that Tsukasa addresses it, I think, is extremely valuable. Why? Because it's saying the author acknowledges that this isn't what was supposed to happen, or like this isn't normal. And when I say normal, it's that you have the confrontation between Kuga and Tsukasa. That single confrontation is enough to knock Tsukasa out till the next day. The level of exhaustion that those two accumulated in that confrontation, Rindo was off hibernating in a pile of blankets and Tsukasa had his head in his hand. Like when we saw them fight off against other people who were, well, Kuga isn't even on Tsukasa's level, but you know, let's say Kuga is Ishiki level. Let's make that kind of conservative estimate. You have that, and then you have that confrontation happening. The man gets wiped out for 24 hours, and then you have this situation. They come in, and what they end up doing is like, you know, Rendo's checking on Tsukasa. Is he tired? And then he's like, no, it's weird. I'm fine. And then he like pops it off with, you might even say I'm at the top of my game. It's just, when you have that sequence happening, what is that ultimately telling us from the author? In story, it's justified. In story, we got justification. Tsukasa acknowledged it as weird. Okay, in story, it's justified. Tsukasa should have been tired, but he isn't. But what does that say from the writer? Well, it just kinda, if you wanted to play the most cynical card, it just says the exhaustion thing doesn't really matter. The exhaustion thing was only important because I needed it to be important in this particular time. If the exhaustion thing didn't happen, things would have been harder for Soma because maybe all of the guys could have been wiped out by Rindo and Tsukasa in a straight succession. But introducing the exhaustion thing made it seem like Irina and Ishiki's strategy at that time was effective because it took out their strong players. Whereas right here, this is where you would have expected the taking out of strong players would have happened. Of course, let's not get trigger happy. This could also just be a feint from Tsukasa. This could be a lie. Like maybe we get into it and we see that Tsukasa's actually a bit more tired than he was. It's just, it really rubs me the wrong way, especially for this one, because they made such a big deal out of it and they exaggerated it so much. To say that a person needs exactly 24 hours, it was such a giant exaggeration that it's just so obnoxiously loud of an event, and to not have it happen later, it's just, you know, the author just kind of did it because it just suited his needs at the time. He needed the story to say that the strategy that the rebels were employing was working, even though he's not willing to have that logical conclusion happen throughout the story, and then he will just hand wave it as there being a weird occurrence with Tsukasa's behavior now. Is it a bad thing? No. I think it's actually way more admirable that he actually went and acknowledged it as weird. That is automatically more valuable than if he never acknowledged it. Why? Because the author's aware of his work. The author's aware of the logical consistencies that he's setting up. If he's going to take the time to go and acknowledge that something's not right here, then I'll respect that because, hey, you put in the effort. But it's just like one of those things, like when you take it, if you were to look back at this arc and you were to like point out little things that what made the arc work all overall, it's just that one is one of those things that you can say, well, that was just kind of contrived. Or you could even call it a deus ex machina if you wanted to play it up, because the exhaustion happened once and it never really came back when you expected it to come back. Anyway, I beat that horse into the ground, but if you guys were still listening to that, thanks. Overall, like I said again, the big point that I want to take away from here is that on one hand, it seems really contrived. On the other hand, you have to appreciate that the author's aware of it, because I would rather authors be aware of any kind of weaknesses than they are just ignoring it and just expecting the readers to accept it at point blank. Anyway, that's it. 20 minutes. All things considered, I love talking about Soma when it's doing things like this, because one of the things I really enjoy is that some of the characters have ideologies and it makes things interesting. Like even when you look at this chapter, what we're talking about is ultimately like things about Tsukasa and Rindo. How are they going to work together? We're talking about like what exactly is Azami thinking. We're talking about like what exactly is Central trying to do, and will that actually work? When you consider the ideas that Soma has collected, you know, it's a pretty cool chapter, and I really like the setup chapters for this reason. Soma is one of those series where setup is vastly more exciting to talk about than actually watching the cooking battles unfold, and I think that's funny. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Till next time, I hope you have a great day.